Thank you, Edison. And I'll go ahead and introduce John Hedtke. I've known John quite a number of years. When I first came at one point I was the president of the local chapter, like Addison is now, and Addison, by the way, is doing a fabulous job. I had asked a couple people who would be good, and two different senior people in STC. One of them was Chris Ward in Austin, Texas, and the other one was our own members that used to be the president, the senior fellow, and all that kind of stuff. She's a fellow. And Catherine, I don't remember her last name right now, Catherine Poe. But anyway,
Yes.
they both said John Hedtke's the man to contact. He just does wonderful webinars, wonderful seminars. He's written all these different ones. He's written all these books. He's written like almost 30 books. It's amazing. He's also a really friendly guy. He's a great presence at whenever we have a annual meeting or the summit for STC. He always is a great presence at that, and he's done a lot of work on the board and so forth. And he's a personal friend of mine, and so I'm just really glad that you're here, and I'm glad all the rest of y'all are here too. Hello, Maggie and Amanda and Donna. Thank you. Faith. Take it away, John.
Here, we'll start with this. This is an older picture. I actually have short hair in this, for example. 3 years ago, I decided that since it was not safe to go out to get my hair cut, in the 1/8 of an inch Malcolm McDowell look, I figured, all right, let's grow it down to my ass again like it used to be 50 years ago. So far, so good. I've got quite a nice ponytail now. I think the best way to sum things up is I've done stuff. That's it. We'll move on. So let's see here. What this presentation is going to cover. What a captive is. What a freelancer is. The advantages and disadvantages of freelancing. We're talking about freelancing first. And similarly of captivity. And a little bit about how to try out freelancing if you're new to it. Okay, some definitions. A captive is a wage slave, an employee. You go to work for a company, you do something, you come home. Now, you'll note that, by the way, when I wrote this, that was before remote work was such a big deal. Nowadays, we have lots and lots and lots of remote work, and I think life is all the better for it. I have not regularly gone into an office for about a decade now. And trust me, I'm very happy about this. I hate commuting. I have always hated commuting. A freelancer, on the other hand, is a contract worker, usually temporary, for some value of temporary, on a contractual basis. And again, could be on-site, could be off-site. There are many distinctions of freelancer or freelance. Some people get incredibly picky about, the proper use of the term. I don't care. You can be a contractor, a consultant, a freelance, a temporary worker, whatever. All of these are vaguely legalistic and completely arbitrary distinctions. The bottom line in being a freelance is that you're usually paid by the hour or the project, and you have a temporary or finite job term that you know about. I have been a freelance writer for a long time. I have been a captive writer for a long time. Both options have their pluses and minuses, and I'm going to tell you about most of them today. But in order for you to be happy, You need to make an informed decision about what you want to do and why, because you won't be profitable if you're not happy. And you won't be profitable if you're not happy. And I feel a need to say something here and now, and that is, we aren't in this business for our health. We are in this business to make money. We are in this business to make as much money as we reasonably can. So hold that thought. This is not great art. We are doing this for the money. And when we get the money, we will do it with the money. But it's all about the money. The lines between freelance and captive are incredibly blurry these days. And I mentioned earlier about a freelance job as having a temporary, a finite job term that you know about. And this is true. I was a captive. I started a new captive job October 17th. Excuse me. I started a new job October 17th this past year, and was doing okay. And then near the end of this May, a couple of months ago, the company had a 20% global layoff. That was 200 people. I got axed, as did 199 of my compatriots. So was I captive? Oh, very definitely. You know, there was stock options and things like that, and insurance. But nonetheless, it's like, it turned out to be a temporary or finite job term I didn't know about. C'est la vie. All right. There is an important principle in all of this. As I say, a job's a job. So what's the difference? But you do want to be happy. There are a couple of rules that you need to work by. Nothing has value if you don't know what you want. Another way to put this is McGee's law, which is, it doesn't matter how you get there if you don't know where you're going. But there's a corollary to this as well. If you don't ask for what you want, you'll never get it. So you need to figure out what you want. And this applies to everything in life, of course. But in terms of a job and a job venue, do you want to be freelance? Do you want to be captive? You kind of have to figure out what it is that you want. And that is the whole purpose of what we're about to talk about. So first off, let's talk about freelancing. There are a ton of advantages to freelancing. The first is money. I'm as greedy as the next writer, possibly greedier. So as a freelancer, you usually get to demand a certain amount of additional rate because you are usually one way or another, a one-stop shop. You're doing all of these things for people. You have your own office. My office here is a thing of beauty. It is 16 by 30. I have 5 floor-to-ceiling bookcases, and the ceilings here are 10 feet tall. I have a built-in kitchenette. I have one of those little 2x2x2 refrigerators, and it's full of all kinds of sparkling water. I have a 3/4 bathroom attached to this. This was designed in this house to be the mother-in-law apartment, so it's perfect. And it's big enough. I have a small gym area. I mean, damn, we're talking cool. So somebody has to pay for that, and that's going to be my client. You nominally get to set your own hours. You nominally get to set your own days. You are working at home. Again, you know, a lot of things are working at home these days, regardless of status. You get to work on the projects you like. That is, if you don't want to work on airplane mechanics, something like that, which I've actually done a little of, you don't have to look for jobs like that. There are some tax advantages. Absolutely everything that you buy that is or spend that is a reasonable job expense becomes a deductible job expense on your Schedule C. For example, as a freelancer, the cost of your internet, what you pay to Comcast or whomever, becomes a deductible expense to the extent that you're using it for your business. Every time you buy pencils, paper, hardware of any kind, a desk, all of this stuff, it's like there's a surprising amount of latitude as far as the IRS is concerned. We, as writers, as documenters, as professionals of this kind, we have a lot of latitude for demonstrating what we are spending for expenses versus the money that we bring in. And so you can expense the crap out of things. There is no dress code. I actually wore a tie to something about a month and a half ago. It was the first time and it was not a work event. It was the first time I had worn a tie for a very, very long time. I have a beautiful collection of ties. They're gathering dust. I have 17, I counted them once, 17 100% cotton dress shirts. They're beautiful, and the grass is greener. When I say the grass is greener, if you work freelance, you can gain far more professional experience than working at some captive job somewhere. For example, in a 6-year period early on in my career, I did 30 different manuals for a dozen different companies. Now, that's a lot of experience. You learn a ton. I learned a lot about the general documentation industry. I learned a lot about production, and I had a chance to hone my skills by rubbing my shoulders with a lot of different writers, developers, and other people. And at the end of it, I also had a much better idea of what I wanted to look for and what to expect in a job. Controlling your environment. I mentioned, I have an office that I just wallow in the pleasure of. I have artwork that I like up on the walls, all sorts of things. Wonderful. But there are other advantages as well, like the cats can come in. This is not always an advantage, particularly if they're telling me that nobody in this house ever fed a cat and that I could stave off imminent starvation if I moved right now. I am rarely moved by such a plea. Being able to raid your fridge when you want to for soda, oh God, yes. Having a really good sound system, even having streaming TV and music and so forth in the background. Because I tend to be ADHD, yeah, big surprise. I like having background noise of some kind. And I have likened it to the idea of telling the demons in my head, oh, go watch cartoons and don't bug me, I'm working. And then I put on something, sometimes literally cartoons, and they go away and they don't bug me and I can write, things like that. And again, all of the, having streaming services, it's a business expense. I get to take it off my taxes. You can frequently avoid politics, not always, but you don't have to get involved in the corporate politics if you don't want to. And as a general rule of thumb, it's a good idea not to, because you can then be perceived as a troublemaker and they won't hire you again. You can simply smile seraphically if somebody talks to you about it and says, I'm a contractor, I really don't have an opinion on this. Or it'd be inappropriate for me to venture an opinion because I don't have a complete picture since I don't work here as an employee. Finally, you can capitalize off corporate misfortunes. Schadenfreude is not merely a satisfying emotional experience. You can benefit from corporate downsizing. You can pick up skilled employees for yourself, for your own projects, as well as business opportunities when the functions of a whole department are outsourced by a company. The place that just laid me off, for example, and I'm not angry about it, I'm just annoyed. It's like, damn it, now I have to go out and look for a new job, captive, freelance, whatever, to bring money in. And it's annoying. It's really annoying. They could have done better, frankly. But it's like they don't have anybody doing all of the corporate the compliance and regulatory documentation that I was assigned to do. And that's going to be a problem for them because they do financial technology stuff. And so somebody needs to do it. There may be a chance that I can get hired back as a freelancer doing whatever the heck it is. I'm not holding my breath in that particular case because they're kind of hurting for bucks at the moment. But nonetheless, I could do this with other companies. There are, unfortunately, a lot of layoffs happening right now, according to LinkedIn, and it hurts. A lot of us are getting laid off because writers tend to be viewed as expendable. All right. All of this is wonderful. I mean, this should put stars in your eyes. It's like, there's freedom, there's money, you don't have to wear clothes to do all of this, a chance to do what you want, all rolled up in a single package with the best coffee you can make. Why don't we all run out and freelance for a living? Well, there are minuses to all of this, such as you can bloody well starve. Just because you're a qualified writer doesn't mean you'll find work when you want it. I have a resume that glows in the dark. I have done just about everything there is. I'm a fellow of the SEC. I've got, a long list of credentials. You've seen my work. I wrote the first online help and the installation manual for AOL for Windows years ago. So my work is on hundreds of thousands of AOL CDs that are now in landfills across the world. I wrote online help for Microsoft Excel. I wrote documentation for how to use Microsoft PowerPoint. Long list of products. All these cool things that I did. It's been 2 months now, and I'm still not able to find work. So you could starve. There is always this possibility. There are no benefits generally that you don't pay for. Now, a lot of agencies, if you go to work for an agency on being a contractor for an agency, they will have some minimal benefits. There will be like a week of paid vacation and maybe some kind of minimal health insurance or something. But generally speaking, no, there's not a lot of benefits. There's certainly no stock options and none of the other sorts of things. There are every day is a working day. And when I say that, when you get into working freelance, you're going to discover yourself thinking a lot about, hey, I could work another hour and bill another hour, which, being the greedy SOB that I am, sure, why not? But this can extend into workaholism. Every hour could be a billable hour, so why not this one too? And you have to draw limits somewhere, or the rest of your life will suffer. As a freelancer, you have to spend a lot of time marketing yourself, priming the pump. How much time? Well, every successful freelancer I know spends 10 to 20 hours a week of what is otherwise unbillable time, just marketing themselves, priming the pump, telling people about themselves, about their services, or just staying current and competitive. All of this is very, very important. Working at home, that sure is an advantage. You don't have to commute. I find it very relaxing. But the flip side is there are times you cannot get away from work because it's right there. And that takes some adjusting. You need to hold that thought. It's like my office is a whole separate area. It's downstairs. I spend most of my waking hours here, but I need to get away from it periodically. And if you start doing freelance, you'll need to do that too. Variability. With contracts lasting anywhere from a few weeks to 12 to 18 months, your professional life is continually going to fluctuate. And even giving people a number where they can reach you during the days can be a little tough. Cell phones have largely solved this, but it's kind of like, where are you working? Well, there is a possibility, for example, that next month I might be working. I'm currently in the greater Seattle area. Next month I might be in the greater Portland, Oregon area for 12 to 18 months. I've got an app in for a job down there. And about a decade ago, I was living in Central Oregon, Eugene, but I was working in the Portland area 2 hours away. And I lived up there for 2.5 years and came home on the weekends. It can happen. Loneliness. This one's kind of interesting. As a contractor, it is frequently just you and your golden abilities sitting home alone, cranking out brilliant stuff. Your pets, well, they are adoring and hungry, may not be long on conversation, and you can suffer from a lack of social interaction as a result, something that you frequently get when you're working captive. Even if you're remote, you're interacting with people every single day. Professional organizations and a good circle of friends will solve this, however. You have to pay for everything. If you want a Herman Miller Aeron chair, which I recommend, I've used them for like 20 some years now, go get one. They're only about $600. You'll have to pay for it yourself, of course. You can't requisition it. Do you want a new computer? I got my first new computer, 2 years ago, in 9 years. I was way overdue. It's a beautiful machine. It's server quality. I mean, it's huge. It's powerful. It boots up from nothing in 35 seconds, which for Windows is not too shabby, right? I pay for that too. You'll pay for everything. You want software, the latest copy of Microsoft Office, of FrameMaker, Madcap Flare, whatever. It's all on your nickel, and you have to take care of it. Now, this is deductible. Every bit of this is deductible, but that's only going to give you a small portion of the cost, and it's not going to happen until you get your tax return. Fiscal responsibility. Oops, there we go. If you haven't learned to be fiscally responsible, you're going to have a problem. You will frequently need to file quarterly city, state, and federal taxes. You need to account for every dime spent on or by the business, which means mountains of receipts, and geez, that gets old. And you need to be sure not to spend money that's come in without making allowances for necessary business expenses. You need to budget for upcoming taxes, or you'll suddenly discover when April rolls around the next year that you have an outstanding tax deficit of $20,000 and no money. And having a $20,000 bill show up for no particular good reason is not fun. As you develop your skills, you may want to consider a good bookkeeper. Excuse me. You will have to provide your own hardware support. There isn't a company technical support group that's going to come when you call. If your computer isn't working, you have to figure out what's wrong, no matter what it is. You have to solve it yourself or take it to someone who does understand all of this and have them fix it for you, which is, again, on your nickel. There is a need for self-discipline. I am fond of saying, When you work for yourself, you have a jerk for a boss. You have to be really disciplined about what you do because your employability now and in the future is a function of your immediate performance. So you also don't see people at their best. And by that, I mean, nobody ever calls a freelancer because they're having a nice day and they want to share it. People call freelancers because they've generally really screwed up, even if it's only, gosh, we didn't budget for enough work resource, and we need one more person to do this surprising job that suddenly materialized. There's always going to be at least an element of bad planning, and it devolves rapidly from there. So you need good people skills, and to appreciate that the people you are seeing are troubled and are going to have problems. And you also similarly have to remind yourself that you aren't their therapist. You're there to do a job, get paid, get out. All right, the summary of the pluses is flexibility. You get to do what you want, when you want, how you want, and generally where you want. The summary of the minuses is risk. Oops, there we go. You need to appreciate that being a freelance writer is a lot like being an actor. You can starve to death in the pursuit of your chosen career. Hang on a sec. Let me pause and say, are there questions? Well, I'm taking a swallow of soda. Nope. Okay. So you need to, as I say, find out what's most important to you in a job and yes, you can. And you can indeed do both. And I will be talking about that in a moment. Well said. Some people, there are going to be little things about what's most important to you. And when I say little things, they're going to sound like little things. And I'm going to say some of these things, and there will be a certain amount of mental snorting of derision on your part. And then I'm going to hit something that's important to you, and you're going, oh, wait a minute. All right. For example, some people don't like to commute. I hate commuting. Some people don't mind commuting at all, but they hate working overtime. I've known people who, at 40 hours and 1 minute, they were out of there, kind of a thing. My own preference for years was sleeping late, something I no longer do, unfortunately. But I don't mind putting in long hours. I will frequently have 12-hour days when I'm writing. There are limits to my change to diurnal versus nocturnal. If I had a job that required me to be there at 6:30 in the morning, it's like, and I had to commute to get to it, hell no, not happening. Whatever is important to you may sound little, it may sound trivial. You may, but it's important, and it's a bottom line for you. Boundaries matter. So, having said all of that about freelancing, let's talk about captivity. All right. What's good about being a captive? Well, generally, stability. That is, ignoring the periodic layoffs. You can be at a place for a long, long time. There was stability there. I knew what was expected. Having been there 5 years, it's like I had my area tuned, running smoothly. Life was good. Benefits. There are a lot of benefits, and we're going to jump to the next slide. I want to show you when people think of benefits like, vacation, sick leave insurance, holidays, coffee in the office, not good coffee necessarily, but free coffee, things like that. Here's some of the things that you can expect for benefits. These are the things that captives get. And this is not a complete list, but somebody is paying for this stuff and it ain't you. And this is a big advantage of being a captive. The general rule of thumb is that if you're making 100 grand a year, I'm pulling a number out of the air. If you're making 100 grand a year, chances are that when you add up all the benefits that go along with everything else, that the company is spending another 50 grand over and above what they are, the 100 grand that they are actually paying you in salary. Ton of stuff, So, and again, going back to the idea of freelancing, all this stuff you get to pay for yourself, ain't it swell? So yes, regular wages. You don't have to dun anybody for paying your invoice. It's like every 2 weeks or a half month or occasionally month. I think not many people pay simply monthly. Every whenever you can look at the direct deposit indication on your checking account and see that the company dropped the last period's wages in. It's not bad. Raises may be difficult when you're a captive. I mean, there's the annual salary review and things like that. And I will include bonuses in there as well. But raises can be harder to get when you're a freelance because you have to say, oh, my rate was 60 an hour, it's now 65 an hour, kind of a thing. And will the market bear it? Wait and see, things like that. But if you are a captive for somebody, you can actually sort of expect to get a raise. You even have a schedule for that. Social interaction. I'd mentioned social interaction before. You get to know not only people, you also get to know what to expect of them because you're working with them for a while. Now, and this is going to sound cynical and snotty and judgmental, and that would be me. But the people that you work with may not be people that you would otherwise socially interact with. However, on the same token, excuse me, there are inevitably a few people that I carry with me as friends and business contacts forevermore from each job. And Maggie, oh yeah, except when the company messes up your direct deposit, you have to chase up folks for that. Yeah, I've had that happen too. I tend to get pretty testy about this kind of thing. It's sort of like, I got bills too, and I expect to get paid. Supplies and software and computers. I'd mentioned this as an expense. You can expect that the company will give you, all the pens and paper, a functional computer, usually a laptop these days, and all the rest. All of this, that kind of thing is paid for by the company. They're also going to pay for your desk and your chair and your monitors, and free tech support. If your computer stops working or you're having internet problems or whatever, you can phone your in-house support crew, even if it's only one overworked person with a toolbox, and say, why is it not working, please? A lot of places, bigger companies have you file tickets. I loathe the ticketing system, even though I understand why it is, but there it is. It's like, it may not be fast, but it's free. Okay. These are the pros of captivity, and they're not bad. They really aren't bad. Now, we know that there are a number of disadvantages to working captive. Here are some of the biggest. You have to go to work every day. They expect this of you. How dare they? I am looking for situations where people will send me fat checks. I will deposit them, or they can even direct deposit them themselves. And that ends the obligation, and they are happy knowing that I have cashed their check. This strikes me as a good way to live. But generally speaking, unless you're on vacation or you phoned in with an eye problem, which is, I have an eye problem, I just can't see going to work today, you really have to show up to work on a regular basis. The employers tend to expect it. You can't sleep late. Well, maybe you can. It really depends on the job, but you generally have to show up at a specific time and be available so they can schedule meetings. Not many bosses these days, watch your Slack or your Teams icon to see that you're actually on, or do anything weird like that, although I've met a few that do. But you actually have to be around so they can schedule meetings, and then you have to make those meetings too. And there we go. You have to do what they tell you to do. There will certainly be some latitude, in your assignments, but you're going to be told what to do and to some extent how to do it. And it's like, okay, maybe you don't want to work on the next manual for the Novamax warhead disarming system. Maybe you don't want to document the new accounting product. That's the job. You have to do what they tell you to do. There are other disadvantages, obviously, but these are the biggies. All right. So to summarize, the good and bad of captivity, the good part is security. Again, none of us know when we're going to get laid off. It does happen. Companies go out of business. Departments get outsourced to India or something like that. Things happen. But generally speaking, you have a fair amount of security. And that's pretty good. The bad part of captivity, though, is stagnation and, well, captivity. You don't have nearly as much latitude in your work life. As I mentioned much earlier, I said that I picked up vast quantities of experience in early in my career by leapfrogging from contract to contract and doing all kinds of things. And it gave me probably a 10-year head start on everybody else that I was working with who wasn't doing something similar. And as a result, I've become the charming little pissant that I am now. So it's like, yes, it has some advantages, without a doubt. Now, which one is better? Going back to Alexia's question. It all depends on what you want, what's available to you at the time. There's no reason you cannot try both, even simultaneously. You can work a full-time job and then moonlight. You can do both. I have. This works better when you are younger and you can short yourself on sleep. Be very careful of this. Side note: from 1986 to 1996, I was working captive and full-time jobs, and in that same period, wrote 15 books. I am now capable of committing the perfect crime because I no longer have any fingerprints. To do all of this, I shorted myself badly on sleep. I did not exercise. My diet kind of sucked. As a direct result of this 10 years of brilliant work, I, in 1996, became diabetic with a heart condition. Don't do this. It's not worth it. Be aware of that. But you should consider making hay while the sun shines. It's like somebody comes along and says, I have a part-time contract gig doing something, or, would you like to write magazine articles? Probably say yes, because what the hell? It adds to your resume beautifully. Do you want to try all of this freelancing stuff? If everything I've told you, even when I tried to pour some cold water on this, did not dissuade you, if everything I've told you leads you to believe that you might like to try all of this, here's a few things that you should know. First of all, if you're a captive, as I say, moonlight to see if you like it and can cut it. Try something small, don't try something big. You don't want to, if you're a captive, you don't want to screw up the captive gig. That's your bread and butter. Stick with it. Use the STC and other resources. Network with other freelancers as well as other captives. Frequently, you'll be talking to somebody who's been working for 8 years at some bank, and they'll say, God, we've got this project coming in and there's no room, and they're talking about hiring somebody, and you go, oh, that could be me, and you're off to the races. In the course of all of this, if you're in a relationship, and most of us are, be sure you have the support of your significant other. I'm pretty good at this freelancing stuff and finding freelance work, and my wife she's retired now, but she was a judge for 32 years, and she's had in that time, she had 2 jobs in that time, one for the Washington State and one for the government, with the U.S. government. The idea of going out and just finding work, just pulling it out of thin air, terrifies her. So you want to make sure that you've discussed all of this with your significant other, and that they understand what you're doing, why, and how. At all times, keep an eye on your money. Have a budget. Know what your burn rate is. How much money do you spend a month? What keeps the lights on and the mortgage paid, and you and the cats fed, all of that kind of thing. You need to know, where the money is going, and how much. A question you might well ask yourself regularly is, if I locked the door and didn't do anything at this moment, how long would I live? How much money have I got to pay the bills? And it can vary from a few months, not so good, to 3 years, which is beautiful. Right now I'm at about 4-month mark, unfortunately. But I have been at the 3-year mark, where I could have locked the door and, gotten cable TV and cat food for 3 years and not had to generate another dime until 3 years ends. And always reevaluate your desires every so often, because things will change. You may well be freelancing and discover, I don't like this. This is too much work. All of that, pump priming and networking and, looking for jobs and things like that. Pain in the butt. I think I'd like to settle down a bit and do something with a little more security, that doesn't require quite so much work out of myself. It's fine. How much money should you make? As I mentioned earlier, when you add in all of the benefits you get as a captive, you're getting about half again as much when you're a captive. So the rule of thumb I used to say, take your annual salary as a captive, knock 3 zeros off the end. That's your hourly rate. Now, that doesn't work so well anymore. The market for technical writers, what we're getting paid, has just sucked a rock. I'm seeing jobs out there right now that are paying, $38 an hour, something like that. And it's kind of like, gee, Kimosabe, don't do me no favors. In 1991, I was getting 45 bucks an hour from Microsoft, for example, and that was kind of the going rate in the greater Seattle area. I have even seen jobs that are, I saw one job from some company that was like 17 and change an hour, and it's like, piss off. It's like, that's nothing. That is absolutely nothing. You cannot make rent, and there's nothing good for it. And as the old rule goes, your landlord is not going to accept exposure bucks to pay for your apartment. So keep that in mind. Taxes are your biggest problem at first. You should, as a rule, save 50 cents out of every dollar that comes in. This will cover your federal taxes and the SE tax. And for those of you who have not freelanced before, the SE tax is the self-employment tax. This is a form off the Schedule C for businesses. And the deal normally works like this. When you're a captive, a W-2 employee, I should say, because you can be freelance in W-2. But when you're a W-2 employee, you pay 7.15%, I think it is, of your gross income for FICA, your Social Security input. And your employer matches that pretty much. When you're self-employed, there's no employer to match that. So you are going to spend, I believe it's currently 12.3% of every dollar that comes in needs to go to the SE tax to make up your federal, your Social Security contribution. If you have state taxes, Washington doesn't, Texas, Texas, I think doesn't, budget for your state taxes as well. Keep every darn receipt. And when I say every receipt, I mean like McDonald's. And make a note whenever you get a receipt, and God, this is a pain in the butt. Make a note on the receipt in ballpoint pen saying, this expense was for X, some few words that identify why you spent money at McDonald's instead of going home and making something. Meal expenses actually are deductible to an extent. Get an IRA and a Roth IRA, both, and use them. And I'm going to let you do the research on that, but believe me, you'll want them. You can fine-tune the whole schmear in a year or two as you get the rhythm for what suits your life. Summary. Freelancing is invigorating. Freelancing is standing on the bow of a ship, leading off into the distance and catching the wind on your cheeks and smelling the salt sea. And that's invigorating. Depending on how you feel about things, it can also chap your cheeks to absolute pain and freeze your butt. But some people like that too. Captivity, on the other hand, is security. You don't have to do all that extra work to keep the work flowing in. You don't have to do all kinds of things. You don't have to file a Schedule C on your taxes. Your taxes become much, much easier. You don't have to keep all of those receipts, and you don't have to worry about a lot of budgeting for a new computer. I have these beautiful dual 27-inch monitors on my system that my previous employer paid for. only about $400 worth, but you know, $400 is $400. So I like both of these. Both of these are good. And going back to my very basic idea, I'm greedy. I like money. I like comfort. I like writing. And so I get to do all of that with this. Other places, by the way, I wanted to mention just off the top that you might look for work. I'd mentioned that you should use the STC and other resources to network. Check various and sundry professional organizations, the STC, AMWA, AMWA.org. AMWA is the American Medical Writers Association. There we go. Where were we? How much money? Taxes summary. There we go. All right. I will figure out how to get you stuff. That link down at the bottom doesn't work anymore. I found that out when I was doing a hot test. I am revamping a bunch of stuff right now, and this is, so you cannot get to this. So I will send the PDF of all of the slides to y'all, and or at least to the esteemed Mr. Want, and you can do anything you like with that. Moreover, as I've said, you are welcome to do whatever you like with the recording. So, you know, A-okay. All right, blah, 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 blah. Secrets of Consulting. I want to mention these because they're worthwhile. Secrets of Consulting by Jerry Weinberg is an amazing book that everybody should buy and read and do what they can to memorize. He talks about things with a light, almost bantering tone. As an example, yeah, it's all like parables and aphorisms and things like that. It's beautiful. As an example is Rudy's Rutabaga Rule. And he talked about how when he was a kid, he was working in a grocery store. He was like 14, I think he said. And the guy who was running things was this big old guy named Rudy. And he, being a 14-year-old, thought that he just knew which way the world worked. And so he was saying he noticed that nobody ever seemed to buy the rutabagas, that they were always there like that. And that, you know, he was wondering why there was, you know, why they even had them out, because they never seemed to sell. And so Rudy was listening to him very intently, you know, nary an expression. And then, so Jerry gets done, and Rudy suddenly grabs a box, shoves it under the bin, and with his one big hand scoops all of the rutabagas into the box. And he's standing there, and he says, you know, and he's got this box of rutabagas, and he says, "Okay, kid, now what?" And that was the basis of Rudy's Rutabaga Rule, which is when you solve your number one problem, your number two problem gets a promotion. It's things like that. I recommend this book beyond anything. Peopleware, 3rd edition, by Tom DeMarco and Tim Lister. And I should ask, are you seeing the appropriate screen? It should be just one slide saying, read these for freelancing skills. Peopleware is a wonderful book that has amazing insights about the software business. It is a seditious book. People chapter 7, I believe it is, and is entitled "The Furniture Police." And that phrase alone should give you an idea of just how seditious this book really is. A Whack on the Side of the Head by Roger von Eck is perfect for inspiring creativity and new ways of thinking. Up the Organization by Robert Townsend, written 60 years ago, should be everybody's Bible for dealing with people, management, and organizations. Clutter's Last Stand is a book by a guy named Don Aslett, who's written a couple dozen books on cleaning. And it is about how to declutter your life, the whys and hows. The Richest Man in Babylon was written in 1926 by George Clason. And it's very simple. It only has a few, I think it's four basic rules for messaging, and it's largely all you need for how to save money and how to get rich. It works. You just have to do it every time you're reading, and you're thinking, well, yeah, but you're wrong. The book's right. Shut up. Keep reading. And The Time Trap by Alex McKenzie. I think he took an idea and carried it a little too far in terms of, it was like, he could have said less, but he wouldn't have had a book. Nonetheless, good book, and I recommend that. And as I say, this link is not currently working. It will work again eventually. I will send you the PDF of all of these slides. You can look at tradebookauthor.com, which does work, but will be, in the not overly distant future, be heavily revised so that it has decent navigation. And you can learn about being an author, a silly business that will not necessarily make you money, but will do wonders for your career. Currently, the only good way to read things is to go to the archived, let's see, there's a thing near the bottom that says archived information. Go to the bottommost one, which is, I think, June 2010. Start there and just read your way up. Yes, this sucks. I could have done better. I didn't. There we go. It's being revised. And that is that. You are abundantly welcome to link with me on LinkedIn. You can ping me for questions. You can even phone me at reasonable West Coast times. I think that's it. Back to you, Addison.